I'm not an expert in kayak camping, but I have done a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll share some of the things that I've learned and some of the places I've gone, and I'll give you a chance to share some of your stories as well so that we can, kind of collaborate and find out some fabulous things about kayak camping, which is honestly one of my most favorite things to do ever. So what I'll talk about. So overall, I'm going to go over what kind of gear to bring. So like campsite stuff and health and safety, always an important thing. And then trip planning. How do you plan a kayak camping trip? So gear, there's always your paddling kit, right? So whatever you normally carry, you'll need that. Plus, maybe a spare paddle is always good because if you're going to stay out for a couple days, you want to make sure that you've got a spare in case, it gets left hanging up, propped up against a tree somewhere. But you'll always want a spare paddle too, kind of a thing. As far as camping goes, the big thing is to not think car camping, because your Coleman propane stove that's, yay big is not going to fit. So the big thing is to think backpacking and, how to cram stuff into a kayak, which can actually hold just about everything except for that big giant camp stove. Lots of tiny dry bags are always better than big ones. And compression sacks. And I'll get to a little story about that here in a sec. And then we'll talk about water and how to pack your, kayak and what to do with the little pointy ends and trim and where you want things. So, general overview. Okay, little story. When I did my first kayak camping trip, I was on a trip with Alder Creek, and we, did the San Juan Islands. And it was absolutely fabulous. And, it's gorgeous up there. And so I was looking forward to the scenery, all that sort of good stuff. But I brought my sleeping bag and put it into a dry bag because I thought, well, I'm going to want to keep it dry, right? Well, my sleeping bag inside of a heavy vinyl dry bag would not fit. I could not get it into my kayak to save my life. Fortunately, somebody else there had some room in their hatch, and they had a bigger hatch opening, and so they were able to carry my sleeping bag for me. But since then, I started camping when I was a child, and unfortunately, a lot of the new technology I missed along the way. And they have these really cool things called compression sacks. Not to advertise for CN Summit because there's lots of these compression dry sacks out there, but they happen to have a really cool one that I thought you might like to see. And you pull those straps down and that big giant, sleeping bag ends up really small. It's so awesome. So just saying, if it's old news to you, then you're probably going, yeah. But if it's new news, like it was to me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is neat. Another really handy thing when packing gear is to have the dry bags that have a window in them. And I don't know about you, but some of mine don't. And so I try and do color coordination, like, oh, this kind of stuff is in this color and this kind of stuff is in that color. So I don't have to open every stupid bag before I find what I want, which I have done in the past. So having a little window there is awfully nice as well. And the technology for this stuff is just astonishing. I'm constantly amazed by this. And the other thing to note about dry bags is that the ones that are that really thick vinyls, like nothing's getting through here, man. Those, they don't compress very well as far as shoving them down. You want the thinner, more high-tech stuff that will allow you to smush it into those spaces in your hatches.
Our award-winning seat.
Oh, shush. Water is a thing. Water may not be a thing. You may be going to a campsite that has water. Cool. then you don't need to bring along a ton of water because you know that you can refill your, hydro flask or whatever you're keeping your water in. You can refill it at the next stop. But some places don't have water. And so now you're forced with, thinking, okay, how am I going to get fresh drinking water along the way and water for cooking and, cleaning up, that kind of stuff. So the one on the one on the right, don't bring that. It's not going to fit in your kayak well. It doesn't want to compress when it's empty. I actually have a 10-liter dromedary, which I really like. It's amazing how much water you have to kind of think about how much water you're going to need along the way, where you're going to be able to refill and all that sort of stuff. So there's some planning involved, and 10 liters of water is actually really heavy. But it's served me really well, and I've never needed to refill it on like a 3 or 4 day trip. So either I don't drink enough, which is possible. The other thing that you can do for water along the way is get like a life straw or some sort of filtration device. And that's great if you're not on salt water, if you're not kayaking on salt water. But on these, it's, oh yeah, never mind. Sorry, I got distracted looking at the chat. But if you're not on salt water, then it's easy to use a life straw. So it's just kind of depends on where you're going, what you need, and how big of a thing you need.
Gina, there's a question about the water bags from Roman Martinez. How do you handle the bad taste associated with the bag?
You must have a more sophisticated palate than I do, because I haven't noticed a bad taste with my bag. It is one of those things, though, that I worry about when drying it out, that maybe some, mold or algae or something might grow in there. And so I'm always really careful when I get home to kind of poof it out as much as I can when it's, sitting there to dry, to try and make sure that nothing is growing in the bag, afterward. And then, rinse, give it a rinse. So packing, this is not how to do it. Don't do this. I appreciate that this gentleman has, or female or whomever, I appreciate the owner of this kayak taking everything. But this would be a nightmare to rescue in the event that a rescue is necessary. I can't imagine hauling it. So in order to pack your kayak, there's a couple of things that you need to pay attention to. Trim is one of them. So I am going to stop sharing here for just a minute so you can see my face. Okay, so when it comes to packing your kayak, you want to make sure that your trim is good. So for example, I happen to have a pen here that's handy. If this is the bow and this is the stern, you want to make sure that you're not riding your boat like this or your boat like this. Either way, you're going to have difficulty paddling it. You want to make sure that your trim from stem to stern is balanced as possible. And that's usually a question I have when I get on the water. So if I get in my kayak and the other folks are all getting in, I'll say, how's my trim? And I usually tend to ride a little to the back, and I can notice that because then my front end, my bow starts to get loose and it's more difficult to paddle it that way. So you want to try and get it, as even as possible. And you also want your port and starboard, so your left and right side. You don't want everything leaning so that you're like this and you're having to balance this way the whole time. So you also want to have things riding in the middle, not too much on one side or the other. So trim is super important. And just ask, you can't see yourself in your kayak. I mean, you can float it out and have a look at it before you get in. That's a thing, but ask the people that you're with. That's a thing too. And where to put stuff. So, this particular person on this photo that I found, one of the good things to do is, I love the fact that they added a wine bottle to both the front, the bow and the stern. Awesome. You can put your beer or whatever, your whiskey, they'll fit in either end, and they'll be able to shove way up in those spaces. Sometimes you have to have long arms to get it out, but one of the things when you shove things, that little stuff that you're not going to need straight away, your deodorant for the next day, you don't need that accessible. It can get shoved way up in those, tiny little pointy bits of your kayak. And it's not hard to get them, because all you need is to get a tent pole, and you can stick your tent pole up there and pull it back down. So it won't get lost up there forever. Or you can just, lift your kayak up and let it fall down to the hatch, so you can get into it that way. But this is a great idea, is to kind of set out beforehand. What am I bringing along? What's going to go in which hatch? What do I think I want in the front? What do I think I want in the back? If you don't have color coordinated, dry bags, that kind of thing, one thing to do to avoid reinventing the wheel every time that you go to pack in the morning, is you can put little pieces of duct tape. So I'll have white duct tape on all the bags that go in the front, and the ones that go in back of the cockpit, those won't have any duct tape. So I'll know all of these go in this hatch, and all the rest of my gear goes in the other hatch. And that way you get an idea about every morning. You don't have to think, what was it that I put this, and how did I make it fit the day before? So just planning it out, it makes a big difference, and it's going to save a lot of time when it comes to repacking the next morning, because you're not having to figure it all out again. So it's an idea. The other thing is that day hatch. And most sea kayaks have some sort of day hatch, the little hatch that's right behind the cockpit. And those are the things that you're going to want to put in that you want access to quickly. So like your water, or your first aid kit, definitely want that accessible. You don't want to have to think, which hatch did I put it in and what is it behind? I don't want to have to unload half of my kayak if I've got to make, do some first aid on the water. That's going to be impossible. You want things accessible, like a first aid kit. Your lunch, that you want really close by, so you don't have to pack and unpack, those things that you just want to grab. There's another thing, and that's a poop kit, because most places along the way don't have bathrooms. And so in the event that nature calls in the middle of your 20-mile or 30-mile excursion that day, you don't necessarily want to have to figure out where you left your shovel. So right behind your in the day hatch is the perfect place for it. I have done some canoe camping with the dog. And I don't know if you guys have ever camped in a canoe, but you can take the kitchen sink, literally. It's amazingly how much a canoe will hold. And in the one picture, the picture on the left, you can see I have a full-size cooler that I brought along on that trip. So you really can fit a lot of stuff in a canoe. And the dog, of course, because the dog always goes with me when we go canoe camping. And so you want things like doggy bags that are accessible as well. Just kind of a joke. But anyway, and no one ever likes to talk about the whole, how do I deal with the calls of nature? And so I am not afraid. I am a biology teacher, and I've talked about much worse things. So let's talk about poop. And the next thing we'll talk about is cooking. So that works. So just a little thing on what do you put in a poop kit?
Gear is an important piece of any backcountry trip. And while backpacks and sleeping bags can be really exciting, don't overlook your backcountry poop kit. Having a dedicated bag for your poop kit helps keep everything organized and sanitary. Inside ours, we have 5 main items. There is hand sanitizer, a trowel, toilet paper, a way to pack out that toilet paper, and a wag bag. Hand sanitizer is important to use after any backcountry bathroom expedition. It minimizes the risk of contaminating while cooking and keeps everyone from getting sick. While you can dig a cat hole with a rock or a stick, we like to carry a trowel. Not only does it make it easier, but you can easily measure 6 to 8 inches deep for your cat hole. Remember, you also want your cat holes to be 200 feet away from water, trails, and camp. And you might notice we don't have a tape measure in our poop kit, but we can still measure 200 feet by taking 70 big steps. We also carry toilet paper and a way to pack that toilet paper out. We have just a small amount of toilet paper, no need to bring the entire roll, and what we like to call a FOPO bag. It stands for fear of packing out. This is just a Ziploc that's wrapped in duct tape. You can put your used toilet paper, pads, tampons, anything like that in there, and then all of it can get packed out so you can leave no trace. Our last item isn't always going to be necessary, but is good to carry as a backup, and that is a wag bag. This is a way to pack out our solid human waste. In some areas, these are going to be required, either because you can't dig a cat hole, because waste won't break down, or because there are just too many visitors. Always remember to check local regulations before you head out on your trip. You can always add more items, but having these essentials will help you leave no trace on your backcountry trip.
So despite all of the whole poop thing, that was a really great video that lines it out. This is kind of how you can do it, and what to carry in your poop bag. So I love the fact that Janelle has a bidet, and I've seen those portable bidets. Those are kind of fun. So if yeah, and helps eliminate any toilet paper waste too. So, okay, so the kitchen and what to eat. You know, I'm one of those people that if you put something in front of me, I'm gonna eat it. But if you ask me what I want to eat, I'll have no idea. It frustrates my husband to death because he's the cook in the house, and he'll always say, "Well, what do you want?" It's like, I don't know. It's like, anyway. So when it comes to camping and I have to figure it out for myself, it's kind of horrifying because I don't know. I could probably eat peanut butter and jelly and be happy, but that's not everybody. So there's lots and lots of different options. So there's dehydrated meals, there's your MREs, you can bring all the components and cook out there, or you can do this whole vacuum sealed thing. And I use it kind of depends on where I'm going, how long I'm going to be gone, and what kind of prep that I'm able to do ahead of time. So if it's a quick little trip, I'll probably throw a dehydrated meal in and be just fine. And there's lots of different kinds out there. Personally, for longer trips, you know, if I'm going up to the San Juans or whatever, I usually spend like the week ahead of time cooking various things and then vacuum sealing them. And I really like that because I can get good, healthy food that I know I made, so it came from fresh stuff. It doesn't take any extra water while I'm out there. And I can cut open the bag and put it in my cook pot and let it heat inside the bag without getting my pots all dirty, which then leads to, you know, then there's the whole washing up after. So that's the one that I really prefer. And I tend to go vegetarian when I'm kayak camping, and not because I am a vegetarian, it's great food, but the meats aren't as quick to spoil that way. So that's just how I've done it. Whether you do it that way or not, it's totally up to you. I have no idea what brand of vacuum sealer it is. I just use it. Sorry. I'll have to, it's in the garage, in the pantry thing in the garage. I'd have to go look at it. It depends. If you freeze them, you know, it certainly will make it keep longer. I haven't done that. I also have a dry bag that's a cooler bag. And so I tend to put some things that I'm worried, you know, if it's got dairy or that kind of thing, I'll put it in my cooler bag and eat those first. And the cooler bag will keep, it'll keep ice in it for, 36 to 48 hours. So it works pretty well. But if you're gone for, you know, longer than just a couple days, you have to eat all your perishables first. The whole you cook thing, I've seen people kayak camping that bring all their stuff and they cut it all up and they make it beautiful. And I just kind of stare at them like, where did you get the energy? Two, you're gonna have to clean that up all, you know, after. And three, can you make another serving for me? So kudos to those of you that love to do that. Yeah, I tend to like it easy. MREs are great. I ate a lot of them when I was in the military and never intend to do so again. There you have it. Here's another thing that sometimes is forgotten. We like to think about, you know, eating really healthy. Oh, I'm preparing all this stuff and I'm not gonna bring, but like Charles said, bring something sweet, like a chocolate, because it's nice at the end of the day. The other thing is you're gonna be sweating as you're out there paddling and you're gonna need to replenish some salts and that sort of thing. And something, you know, salty helps do that. And whether you know, want to trust that your chips won't get all crushed or have something else salty along with it, it's totally up to you, but something to not forget. My favorite source for meals is fresh off the grid. And I hope that I can make this presentation available to all of you because there's a bunch of links along the way that you might want to see. But fresh off the grid is absolutely amazing. And it's a camping cooking website. And they've got tons of recipes for snacks and for breakfast, lunch, dinner. And it goes from vegan and vegetarian to, you know, the full-on carnivore and everything in between. Has backpacking things and car camping things. It's amazing. And their food is good. So, okay, cooking and cleanup. Cooking. Think backpacking. Little stuff, not the big giant Coleman stove. Washing up is always a thing. So this little scraper here thing is fabulous for like scraping out stuff so that you're not getting your washing up bowl or whatever all gooky while you're trying to wash, you know, get your dishes clean. And there's lots of different kinds of water containers that you can do your washing up in. There's lots of different ways to wash up. I like, you know, just a little bowl that I can put some water in and, you know, clean it up that way. So that works for me. And as some of you guys were forecasting, you know, you have to be careful about food waste and smells and that kind of thing. For the love of God, don't put your food waste at the campsite and leave it there, because that's bad for the animal. It's really bad on the animals. People food is not animal food. And the animals start to get used to food being at that site, which means they're going to start coming. And if it's things like bears, you don't want them to be used to coming to your campsite to get food because, you know, you'd rather them find it somewhere else. Birds, raccoons, chipmunks. The raccoons, just here to say, if you've ever camped at Jones Island, the raccoons there and the sea otters are notorious for breaking into your, you know, your kayak. And so actually emptying your kayak of food and keeping the hatches open That way they don't rip open hatches in an attempt to get to your food, because that's happened as well. You know, they're so anxious to get in that they'll tear through, you know, your hatches, and then you're in trouble for the rest of the trip. And, you know, there you go. So keep those kinds of things in mind and be a good camping person, not leave your stuff around. Hang it, do whatever. Don't feed the wildlife. Okay, quick thing on health and safety. So first aid, heat and cold, how do you communicate? What's a float plan? What do you do if you capsize? All those kinds of fabulous things. Okay. What do you pack to wear? Well, it depends. So here's one of the really nifty things that I learned from Teresa when we did our little backpack trip. I don't remember if it was the trip around Harstein Island or the trip around San Juan Island, Teresa, but you pulled out, you know, I was a little chilly, and Teresa pulls out this down coat, or I think it was a coat that you had. It's like, oh my God, what a fabulous idea. Because they pack really small because they're made of down. So lots of airspace, right? But keeps you warm. So fantastic tip I learned from her, you know, to keep warm, you know, when the nights get colder. And it really all kind of depends on where you're going to be. If you're paddling the Puget Sound, you're probably going to need a dry suit. Or some sort of immersion wear. If you're paddling the Willamette, maybe you can kayak like, you know, the person on the right and just wear shorts. So kind of depends. Do you expect it to get rainy? Layering is always good. So kind of a thing. Communication. There's all kinds of ways to stay in contact, and communication in case of an emergency, or just to let your loved ones know that you're still breathing, is, you know, an important thing. Cell phones, fabulous. Make sure you put them in a dry bag so that, you know, they don't get wet and then you can't use them. But cell phone signals aren't 100% reliable everywhere. So learn how to use a marine radio. And I've got a link here for the basics of how to use it. Practice on shore before it's an emergency and you need to use it on the water. I always carry a rescue link with me. I don't know, I had a horrible experience a few years ago in February on the Columbia River. Fortunately, the cell phone worked, but from there on out, I have a rescue link so that if I need someone to find me, you know, it's a personal locator beacon. I can flip that on and help can come on the way. And then you could always get a sat phone. I've never used one, but it's another option. So know how your equipment works, carry the appropriate things, and practice ahead of time. And as far as communication goes, one of the best pieces of communication that you can leave with your loved ones at home, or your friends, or whomever, your next door neighbor, is a float plan. I can't emphasize this enough, because if you don't, you know, come back when you're supposed to, they need to know where to start looking for you. If you just say, well, I know they were out on the Puget Sound. Okay, it's really, really big place. Where'd they put in? Where were they planning to stay? So, oh, fabulous. I'm glad to hear that Paula will go over GPS with emergency stuff. That's fantastic. So float plans, the article at paddling.com, I don't know how many of you guys follow that website, but I get, you know, periodic emails from them, which is nice. And the float plan that they outline and how to do it is really, really good. And depending on what group I'm taking with, I want to know everyone's contact information. So I want to know, you know, person A, who's the person that should be contacted if something should happen to you? Person B, same thing. What kind of kayaks are you paddling? All those sort of things. And then I also leave that info with my husband, because if something does happen, he doesn't want to be the only person out there with everyone's contact information, because you want to get everyone on board and give everyone in your group's families that information. So he could call everybody else and let them know, you know, here's the situation, they're a day overdue, you know, let's coordinate together, rather than him being the one to panic. So it's one of those things, just sharing contact information amongst everyone so that everyone has it on the water and everyone on land has it. So just kind of, maybe it's over preparing, but I don't think so. So it's no deal. In the event that you capsize, which if you capsize in a normal situation, then, you know, there's like 5,000 different rescues you can do. If you capsize with a loaded kayak, that's a whole nother matter. And before I took a bunch of people out that I wasn't very familiar with their capabilities and stuff, we went over some rescue techniques, practice ahead of time, just so that, you know, I knew kind of where everyone was. I can't imagine trying to hoist a loaded kayak up over my bow to get someone rescued. What a nightmare. And then you end up with the whole pumping out your cockpit thing. So one of the things that I went over with folks is how to do a tea rescue. Where to go? What resources are there? What about the leadership and plans A, B, C, and D? Where to go? Oh my goodness. In the Pacific Northwest, there's nearly limitless options for kayak camping. It's absolutely astonishing. You know, for easy, close to home stuff, there's the Willamette River. I just did a fabulous Willamette River camping trip with Steve Pruitt and Elizabeth a couple weekends ago, and it was lovely. So it was close by, easy to do, you know, nice, calm water. It was just zen. So that, you know, great stuff. Just great places to be. And you can camp on the islands on the Willamette, which is really nice. The Lower Columbia River Water Trail, a little bit more difficult, potentially difficult kayaking, because now you're going to have to worry about bigger ships and tides and wind and, you know, waves. And so it can be a bit more challenging, certainly, than the Willamette. It's bigger water, but some fantastic places to paddle along there. And then there's the Cascadia Marine Trail that is for the Puget Sound, and it'll show you all the different camping spots that are specifically for boaters. So, you know, the normal person can't, you know, take that spot if it's, you know, attached to other parts of the land. So they can't drive up and camp there. They are first come, first serve. So you kind of have to make sure that you have a plan A, and then you have a plan B, and then maybe you have a plan C, just in case things don't go the way that you expect. And for instance, on the Columbia, when we paddled from Scappoose down to Astoria, one of the things that I noted was, I'm not sure how far we can get every day. So I had my goal, you know, about 25 miles, 25, 30 miles. Okay, that's going to be plan A. What if I can get further? So then my plan B was for a further spot. And then what if I can't get that far? And then my plan C was the spot that wasn't quite as far, so that I had contingency, you know, along the way, and, you know, what to do if something went awry. And something did go awry, you know, weather picked up, and we happened to have a fabulous crew on shore that was willing to shuttle us around. Thank you, Michelle, for that. So, you know, that's another option. So it's all about planning and preparing ahead of time. But there's a lot of stuff online, and a lot of research that you can do. There you have it. Some resources that you can use. if you're paddling in the Puget Sound or the Columbia, you're going to want charts. There's fabulous charts online. I download the PDF and then make them, manipulate the PDF so that I have just what I want. And so that's a great way to use a chart. The way I do anyway. There's lots of weather resources. The link on here is for NOAA. The chart link is for NOAA. NOAA tides. I like to use Deep Zoom. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Deep Zoom or not, but it's an animated site that shows the movement of all the tides in the Puget Sound. Very fun, very cool. And for wind, I use windy.com, which can help predict winds. I know I've been talking a lot. So let me just kind of finish up with something that I intend on doing, and that is Paddle Canada. Paddle Canada, a lot of you I know haven't heard of it. It is analogous to, say, the BCU or the ACA, except it's for Canadians. And it is an astonishing program. The link is here, and they have a particular trend that is just for kayak camping. I wanted to go last year, but we had the whole pandemic thing, and then the Canadians won't let us come anymore. So anyway, I'm hoping to do their kayak camping thread because I'm not an expert and I can always learn more. So just kind of a plug for Paddle Canada, and it's close by.